Right, hello. Right. So, yeah, I want to take the time to catch up with a lot of the stuff that I supposed to learn yesterday. Especially some CSS, right? Some gorgeous CSS. No, I'm kidding. Never like CSS. But today we will think responsibly. And one of the first things that we are going to do is CSS unit. CSS unit, something like crazy pixel, EM, RM, something like that. Hopefully we can learn a lot of things today. I spent this afternoon studying JavaScript. And yesterday we didn't learn that much. We didn't study that much. And instead I went to a golf course for 18 hole, and it's really good. It's really nice. Worth the trade. But now today I actually have to catch up with a lot of things. So let's go into the video. Let's go into this.
Take a dive into making responsive websites. The first thing that we need to do is take a bit of a deeper dive into CSS units. There are many different types of units that we can use. We have absolute units, and this is what we've already been using. We have relative units, and we also have percentage, which is a bit of a special case. So absolute units, you've already seen these. This is the pixel. They're the easiest ones to understand because they're a fixed size, and they're always the same size. We also have a whole bunch of other ones that you don't see come up too often. You have points, centimeters, millimeters, inches. If you can think of a unit.
Right, so absolute we use pixel, points, centimeters, millimeters, inches. Right, I see.
Unit that exists in the real world, you can use that unit in your designs. Now, the thing that's weird about those, ignoring pixels, we're just thinking like the point, centimeter, millimeter, inch. If you put your a ruler up on the screen, they're not really going to correspond to it. You shouldn't really be using them unless you're doing print styles. If you make a style sheet or a set of styles for a document to be printed, in that case, that's fine. But the rest of the time, if you need an absolute fixed unit, go with your pixels. We also have percentages. So percentages are mainly used for widths, and they're pretty easy to understand.
Oh, is it
a percentage that's relative to the parent? Now, I said they're usually used for widths because on height, things get a little weird. Sometimes it's relative to the height of the parent, sometimes it's actually relative to the width of the parent, but we're not setting heights very often. We're going to see some use cases later on in this course where we will be setting heights, but for now, we're going to be sticking with percentages for widths because that's usually where we're going to be using them. And it makes it really easy both to do something that's going to be like 80% of the whole browser window, or if it's children, sometimes you want two columns, so one of them is 60% and one of them is 40%.
Sometimes 60,
70% and
sometimes
30%,
70.
and you know they're taking up the 100% total. So it's much easier than trying to calculate the actual pixel dimensions on things when you use percentages. The last type is relative units, and there are two different types of relative units. There's units that are relative to font sizes, and
relative to font size.
Relative to viewport. So
Viewport
is your browser window.
Viewport. I think people usually use viewport.
Starting to think responsibly, we're not going to get into the viewport unit. We're going to focus on the ones that are relative to font size because they're used so much more.
Wait, what? Really?
Units have special cases. They're definitely used in some situations, and we are going to look at them in this course, just not in this module. Now, the idea of having units that are relative to font size, it might sound a little bit complicated, but once you start playing around with them, it's really not that bad.
Not that bad.
As I said, we're only going to be paying attention to the ones that are relative to font size for now, and not with the viewport units.
I hate mosquitoes.
So the two units we're going to be seeing are M and Rem. There are actually other ones as well. You have a CH unit and some others, but we're not going to get into them for now. We're going to focus on the M and the Rem because these are the ones that are used the most often. The viewport units, just so you know them, we have the VW, VH, VMin, Vmax. They stand for the viewport width and height, and then the viewport minimum or maximum, which those ones are weird and they have specific use cases, but the VW and VH are pretty handy. As I said, we're not going to get to them in this module though. So that's it for our quick introduction into the different units. In the next one, we're going
view width, you have like a screen, right? It's going to be section, and if I'm not right, I think it's like view width, like and VH in CSS. I think divide like your page into like some CSS stuff. Yes. So you have like 100%, 100%, or a viewport. Let's say you have, let's say this computer is like 100% with view width is 100%. 50% is going to be middle, and then yeah, the rest is like 10, 20, 30, 40, and then 50, and then like stuff like that. This is for like phone. So at a certain view width, you want to make it smaller so that the max is not going to be over the percentage. Right? I'm not sure. Don't listen to me.
Since we've already been using pixels, which is an absolute unit a lot, we're going to take a dive in the next video and look at how percentages work and get our hands dirty with a layout.
Okay.
We're going to start with percentages instead of M and Rem just because it's much easier to understand how they work. So if we look at a layout like this, and we will be making this layout in the next module of the course.
This is probably
because we're going to make
60-40. I'm assuming, yeah, it's probably 60-40.
Responsive. We're going to make this work on small screens up to big screens, and that's going to be our project in the next one. But for now, just looking at this and thinking about it with what we know at the moment, I would have a set width on the total size of this. So say I say the entire document here is 960 pixels. So I set a width, I put a container on the whole thing or something, and I say width 960 pixels. So that's fine, and this is a common size we used to use in the really, really old days. And then I have the two parts here, so I need to define an individual width for the left and the right side. So I might say, well, I want that left side to be about 70% of that, so I need to calculate what that is. So I do 960 times 0.7, and that would give me 672 pixels. So now I know the width, and I set the width of 672 pixels for my left side. But then there's also the other side, and I have to find out the fixed pixel value for that side. And well, then I also have padding in there, so then I'd have to start subtracting padding and doing all this. Oh, it's annoying, right?
Yeah, I can see why.
Start thinking about all of these things. And this is for a fixed width. Imagine now you're trying to bring all those numbers into it you're trying to like adjust it for different screen sizes. So instead of complicating matters, when we think responsively, we want to simplify matters.
Simplify it.
Thinking responsively, and sorry if I ever say responsibly. They're so similar. So when we start to think responsively, it's all about trying to simplify and not complicate matters. So you remember this layout, we just finished it, but let's say we wanted to turn this into a more responsive layout instead of the fixed layout like we have now. We can do that. So let's go and take a look at how we can do it. And you can probably guess, the one thing that we really need to change is this fixed container width. Because right now it has a width of 620 pixels. So we have a set
620
width on that container.
So we do.
Turn this border back on, just so we can really visualize what's happening while we're playing with this. So I'm going to save that for the moment. We're going to come and take a look at it. And you can see when I play with the screen size, we're set at 620 pixels. So it's working at big screens. But if we go smaller, all of a sudden I run into this problem where I have side scrolling.
Okay.
So I get a scroll bar to go left
That's not
and right.
good. It's not good if you have this.
My screen is too small for the content that's in there. My content is wider than my viewport width, and that causes the side scrolling issue. So if I was going to open this page on a cell phone, it just wouldn't work, right? I would get this issue. I wouldn't be able to see it. I get this weird problem there that I'm not even going to worry about right now. It just does not look good.
Does not look good at all.
As I mentioned, we want to change this from a set width to a percentage. So what I want you to do right now is change this over to a percentage. It has to be 100% or less, and I would go with less than 100%. It would defeat the purpose of the container if not. Try different sizes, see what they look like. Play around with the screen size in the player here, and then once you're happy and you sort of see what's going on, I'm going to dive in and we'll look into it in a little bit more detail.
Right, let's play with this. Width is going to be 25. Let's go. Let's say 50 view height, view width. Right. Let's see this. No, it's like adapted, but not picture. Is the picture in the container as well? Picture is in the containers, but it's not working with the containers. Interesting.
Great. So it's pretty evident. Let's say I do 50% on this. I think it's obvious what's going to happen is those containers are now 50% of the total screen size. You might have got a little surprised with your image sticking off the side, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But we can see with the container now, as I grow or shrink my screen, the container is adjusting itself automatically, which is pretty cool, I think. Because we know the container's width is set to 50%, I know I have 25% on the left there and 25% on the right left over. So that's pretty cool that I can sort of make this container that adapts to my screen size. Now the problem is my image. So before we see how we can actually fix that thing that's going on with the image and understanding that, what I really want you to understand is what is this 50% of? So if my container is 50%, it's always going to be 50% of its parent. So we have a few different containers here, as we can see. This container here is 50% of section 1. This one is 50% of my header, and this one is 50% of section 2. Now, my header, my section 1, and my section 2 don't have widths on them. And block level elements, by default, have a width of 100%. So section 1, section 2, and my header are all 100% of my screen size. So that just means that my container ends up being 50% of my screen size. Now, what would happen if I came and set a width of 500 pixels on my header? Can you take a guess before you come and look at what's actually happening on the page? What do you think has happened to the container that was inside my header? So let's go and take a look at it, and you can see that I've limited my header to 500 pixels, and this container is 50% of that 500. So I have 25% there, 50% here, and then another 25% there. So this container is now smaller than this container on this side, because each one is only looking at its parent, and it's not looking at anything else. Now normally I'm not going to have a set width on something, because that makes that whole thing look pretty ugly, so we're going to get rid of that. We can go back and take a look at it. And there we go, we fix that. So just remember always, when you're using a percentage, that percentage is always relative to its parent. But a lot of the time, the parent is just defaulting to 100%. We're going to run into situations where maybe that's a little bit different. Even if you feel a little bit confused right now, in the long run, it does actually make our lives much, much, much easier. I'm going to leave this video for here so you can play around with it a little bit. Make sure you really understand how that's working. If you're a little bit unclear, try playing with the width of your header, of your section 1 and your section 2 to really see how this affects it, and then maybe even play around with this width as a percentage, just to really make sure it's clear. And then once you figured that out, in the next video, we're going to look at how we
it's only 50%, and it's always start in the middle. Because you do margin 0 auto, right? I see. Controlling the width of image.
Okay, so we have our containers that are set at 50% of our total screen size, but we have this really awkward problem that's going on with our image. Our image just does not look very good when it's sticking out the side like that. So how can we fix it? Can you think of a way that we could solve that problem? Is there something that we've looked at so far that would solve it? Because we have all the tools we need to be able to fix that. So see if you can think about it, come into code, try playing around with something, and see if you can solve the width of the image.
Image has to be... There's no image tag. Is it position relative? Let me try this. Images. What is it called? IMG. Yeah, it's supposed to be IMG. IMG, and then we do position relative. Try this. Run. Oh, it's not working. How do I do this, guys? How do I make it stick into the inside of it? Is it going to be display? No, like position. Should be position. I don't know. Display. Block. No, it's not working. Position relative not working. Awkward pictures. Display. Inline. This is so awkward. Display flex. Nope. Has to be. What can it be, guys? What can it be? I'm trying to make the image fit inside this containers. It's supposed to, because it's within the containers. Width 50%. Try this. Oh, it's only 50%. That doesn't work. Hello. How are you doing? Satendra. Am I saying it right? Probably Kuma. Can I call you Kuma or Satendra? Satendra. That's a nice name. That's a dope name. I've never seen anyone with that name. That's a cool name.
Hopefully what you thought of is you can actually set a width on your image. So if we're going to take a look here, images are a little bit weird. And what you probably don't remember is when we first were looking at block and inline, I mentioned that images are actually an inline element. They can flow with text. If I put an image in a paragraph, the text on that line will actually...
Hello. So, how are you doing? I'm trying to figure it out. I did 50% here. Let's do 100%. 100% of the image. I think it's work. Yeah.
Low width. Put that image in the paragraph itself. They're a bit of a special case. There's things that are a little bit different with them, but they are technically an inline element.
So it's an inline element, so it's going to the display like that. I see. Yeah, I'm watching tutorials. I did the dice game already. Sorry, because I didn't change it. I was a little bit, because I don't know what I'm going to do next, so I'm watching some tutorials and yeah, do some work, thinking.
So they're not...
I'm a beginner, so...
defaulting to 100% width. They're defaulting to the size of themselves, what that size of the image is. So what we can actually do is we can come in, and I like grouping it sort of here with all the other things that I'm doing in the general area instead of the more specific areas where I'm styling things. And I can select my images, so IMG. I'm not putting a dot, I'm not putting anything else, because I'm selecting my image itself. So I'm going to select my image, I'm going to give this a width. Now this width, for now, I'm going to give this a width of 250 pixels. It's a set unit, we're not going to leave it there, but just to show you what that does. So look at that, my image size has shrunk down. The one thing you have to be really careful with if you set a width on an image is not to also set a height to it. Because if I set a height on this image, which you can do, it will actually end up stretching the image.
Yeah, it's look ugly.
And making it look really, really ugly. Whereas if you only put one or the other, so I could say a height or I could say a width, either one is going to work. And if I only have one of them, it's automatically going to handle the second property. So it's going to keep it.
NYC, you're staying in NYC? Nice city.
Yeah,
nice city.
Instead of stretching it. So you know now that we can set a width on an image, how do you think we can get that image to match the size of the container?
Going to be 100%.
So hopefully you said you use a percentage. And what I want you to do is set it and see. So on my container, we gave that a width of 50% here. So if this has a width of 50%, it makes sense to give the image a width of 50%. But if you did that, you might have noticed it didn't work. It's pretty small. But if you shrink this, you'll see it is growing and shrinking with of my page. So the percentage is working, just not what we thought. In our index here, when we set the width of the container, this was 50% of the width of section 1, which automatically was the full size of my screen. So it ends up being 50% of my screen width. This image, on the other hand, its parent is the container itself. So this image is whatever percentage I set for a width on my image will be a percentage of this container width. So if we come into my styles now, my image, I actually want it to be 100%. So if we go and look again, we can see that it has been fixed. And now, whatever I do here, my image is going to grow and shrink with the size of that container and match everything that's around it, which just makes the layout work much better. So if I
so like 100% is going to be 100% is going to be full width. But wait. I did this, but if it's 100%, this one is 50%. So we basically have the width of this to be 100%, 50% of the section. And then this thing is going to be children, right? The picture is going to be 100% of the containers. So basically that's how all this goes.
Images are a
not that
weird.
not that
And
bad.
what you probably don't remember is when
I see.
first we're looking at not getting like this massive, it's almost much better. So if I come down and get rid of that magenta border and we go and look at it again, we can see that it looks nice and fancy and it fits well with the overall look of the document. The only thing is a 50% width is a little bit small. So if I come down to this, everything is getting a little bit smushed. I'd rather that it's sticking close.
Hello. Yeah, I'm just trying to articulate what he is saying. Is I did this before, I think, but I don't remember anything. We're trying to relearn all of this because it's like when you're not practicing something like for a while, like you're not playing tennis for like 5 years and then you start going back. Yes, you have some of the muscle memory, but you don't know anything. You don't remember anything. You don't have ball feelings.
Closer to
that is
sides,
like tough things.
I'm not getting like this massive, it's almost acting like padding. Look how small that image is, I can barely see it. So it's really common to not have a width of 50%, but to do like a 90% or something like that. Because on small screens, that's going to look a lot better. That's sort of that cell phone type look that you're probably used to having and seeing. But as this gets bigger, at one point, now we're getting too big. Lines of text going from one side all the way to the other is really, really awkward. So we want to try and avoid having text that stretches from one side to the other.
One side to the other is bad. All right, I see.
Video, we're going to look at how we can do that.
Yeah, so you basically set the containers,
so
set the container of text to like let's say 50%. It's going to be somewhat
We've got
awkward.
our layout working, it's looking nice and dandy, but it's getting too big now when we're getting up to these big sizes. We don't want that to happen. What we can do to do that is a new property. We're not worrying about a new value right now, we're thinking of a new property. It works with the width, and you probably saw the name of this lesson was min and max width. So we can actually set a width and a maximum or minimum width on an element.
Okay, guys. So let's do this.
I'm going to come and put that border back on here of 2 pixels solid magenta, just so we can really see what's happening once again. And let's come and give this, we have a width of 90%, but I'm also going to give it a max width of 600 pixels.
600 pixels.
620, because that was our original design. So
620.
we'll stick with the 620 that we originally had. So now if we come and take a look at this, and I refresh.
So it cannot go more than that.
It's working at our small screen sizes. Our container is growing, it's staying at 90%, But at one point, it's going to get locked into play, and right around here, it stops growing. It's hit its maximum width. And that means at large screen sizes, my text and line lengths aren't going to get too long, but at small screens, everything works nice and perfectly.
What? Wait. Max width?
Maximum width.
Maximum width.
At large screen sizes, my text and line lengths aren't going to get too long, but at small screens, everything works nice and perfectly.
Nice and
perfect.
perfect.
Of both worlds going now. Set a set value for the maximum size we want, where we can keep a percentage to let it shrink when we want it to. We can also set a min width. So if I came on here and said min width, I'm going to set it pretty big, of 500 pixels. I wouldn't normally do this on a container, but just for demonstration purposes. We have our max, so it's never going to grow bigger than 620. And if I go this way, it will never get smaller than 500. So when I hit 500 pixels, you can see it stops, and then I get side scrolling again, which is why I wouldn't set in.
Alright, let me try this. Alright, let's stop. 500. That's 500. This is 600. Wait, what? What is this? So that's min width 500 pixel. How is that 500 pixel? Interesting. Interesting.
But it does demonstrate how that property works. So for now, I'm going to take this off. I just wanted to introduce the idea of the minimum width in there, but for the max width, I will leave it on there. When we're starting to think responsively, for the container, this is a really common property set on something to give a maximum size.
Guys, I have a good joke. What does BS and CSS have in common? You always have to think about it responsively. My joke game is on point.
Depends on the layout and what you're building, so I'm not going to say that there's a specific max size that you should be going. We'll base it on the design that you're doing. I will be going more into some best practices for total lengths and total sizes in a little bit. Interestingly enough, if you put your max width above your width, it's still going to work because they're two different values. Max width and width are two different ones. Same with min width. You can put them in any order in your CSS and it won't have an effect. It's going to work no matter what. So play around with them, see if you can get used to it or figure it out. If it's something that you're finding a little bit confusing, don't stress about it too much. We're going to be using these a lot in the following projects that we're going to be building. It's just going to help reinforce it the more we use it, so you'll get the hang of it.
So max width is not going to go over that. 600 is 600. It cannot go over it. So 90% of 620. It's going to use 90%. Whatever the frick it is. I'm going to use 90% of that. And it's margin 0 auto because it's going to be in the middle. And then use 90%. So this is 5%, 5%. Because you are left with 90%. Interesting. I like it. See, this is stuff that I think I like. I used to love CSS. I like it. I like CSS before. But then the longer the further in that I study, the more I hate it because it's all about theory and you have to remember a lot of stuff. It's not logical. So you cannot have like a different way of doing it. It's basically just if padding is 10, it's going to be all 10. It's going to be all 10. And it's just like you have to remember a lot of stuff with CSS. But like with all you have to Google. Sometimes it doesn't work together because like there's some hidden rules that you have to know, like some default values. Like for example, like an H1 or H2, there's a default margin. If I remember right, they have like a default margin. How stupid is that? And P doesn't have anything.
Get more practice with
right, but let's move on to.
We're going to get a lot. We're going to be using them throughout this course, but there's two others that we really need to look into. So a quick recap on what relative units are. They call them relative units because they're relative to something else. They're either relative to a font size or to the size of a viewport. So the M and the rem are both relative to the font size of other elements. So M's are always relative to their parent's font size, and the font size is an inherited property. So if you don't declare it.
I want to know like the rules of like how much EM we should use, how much IM you should use.
Where it's getting it from the size that you set on the body. If you didn't set it, the body's actually inheriting it from the root HTML element, and that has the 16 set on it. Now that I say by default because people can override the font size in the browser in their settings, and so that can actually change what the default is on that property, but we're not going to worry about that at all right now. But let's go and take a look at how they work. So I've kept the site that we were already working on, but I've deleted some stuff, and we're going to be playing around with this a little bit. So before we get into the unit itself, I want you to think way back, and we're going to create a list. So remember how lists work? You can do either an ordered or unordered list. I really don't mind. See if you can remember how they are, but if you don't, that's okay. It's been a long time since we've seen a list, but do your best to try and remember before I go.
Right, so we do UL, then we do these LI. Let's do these first, then we do these, and we do LI, and then we put something in LI. We do this, and then we do boop boop. Right.
And put one in here. And just give it like 2, 3, 4 elements. Make sure there's not just one list item in there, but there should be multiple list items.
Going to be boom, bam, bonk, boom, bam, bonk. Alright, let's do this.
Just create a quickly at weapons. So it looks like there. So we have a bulleted list since I used an is of 1M. And when I do that, nothing's actually going to change because 1 means copy the font size of the parent. Now the parent doesn't have a font size on it, so it's going to go down and down and down until it finds something that does have a font size on it. So the font size is being declared all the way up here on my body. So the font size is 18 pixels here. So that means if I change this 18 pixels.
Wait, guys.
1 means what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my UL to have a font size of 1M. And when I do that, nothing's actually going to change because 1 means copy the font size of the parent. Now the parent doesn't have a font size on it, so it's going to go down and down and down until it finds something that does have a font size on it. So the font size is being declared all the way up here on my body. So the font size is 18 pixels here. So that means if I change this 18 pixels to say 25 pixels, everything stays the same. So my paragraphs got bigger, this got bigger, because as an inherited property, it's sort of the same as setting something as 1M.
See,
you're saying
some of the stuff is like CSS. You have to know about like parent and child. Which one is parent? Which one is child element? So this is
saying match the font size of the parent. So it won't actually have an effect. Where it will have an effect is, and I'm going to bring my UL all the way to the top here just so I don't have to scroll up and down. If I change this font size to 1.5, that's the same as saying that this is, so 1.5 is equal to 150% of the font size of the parent.
Yeah.
So we can go and look
so
at
like
how
25.
that would work. So if I refresh, now this is massive. It's now 150% the size of the paragraphs here, which are at the 25 pixel. So whatever I change on here, if I change this down to 10 pixels, this will now, so it would be 1.5M is 150%. So that means in this case, it would be 250 pixels. So you can do a quick math to figure out exactly. So super
25 times 1.5. So it's going to be big.
So it's always a relative unit. As I said, it's always relative to its parent. So in this case, it's inside of section 1. So if I said section 1 has a font size of 20 pixels, this font size is now 30 pixels because it's going to be 1.5 times bigger than the font size of its parent. You need that later. And then I have my body, which is set to, say, 16 pixels for now.
16 pixels.
So if I come and take a look at that, everything is sized and it's all looking good. But if I come and change this number and I set this to 10 pixels, everything is going to adjust with that. So now all of those units have automatically adjusted in size. My headings are smaller, my list is smaller, my paragraphs are smaller, my headings have shrunk. Everything is reacting together instead of each being a completely separate unit. And this can be really handy, where you can change one font size and have it affect your entire site. It's very handy, it's very useful. But there is a big problem with M's, and we're going to see what that is in the next video. Before we get there though, if you want to just play around in here, try different M sizes, see if you can get the hang of it, play around maybe with H1 and H2 sizes, and then modifying this. Try playing with the parent font sizes if you want to.
Stop playing with the parents. Oh yeah, naughty.
Handle how it's working. Just like percentages though, these are units we're going to be using a lot from now on. I just want you to get a vague idea of how they're working before we dive in and start using them a lot. So even if it's a little bit weird right now, it will be something you get used to a lot faster than you think.
Right, this is somewhat okay, understandable. Not that hard. It's more of the, you need to know.
So as I mentioned at the end of the last video,
the hidden rules, like EM, if it's 1, it's going to be the same as the parent, but more than 1 is going to change by 100% plus. Like if it's 1.5, EM is going to be the parent size, parent font size. Let's say it's like 16, 20, let's say 20 pixel, then it's going to be 150% of that 20, so it's 20 times 1.5. Pretty annoying to.
There is a problem with the M unit. M's are super convenient for some things. We're going to see some use cases where I use them all the time, but when we use them for font size, it can create this weird cascading effect where things just get out of control, and it can be really bad. So if we come and look, I'm just continuing where we left off. Nothing is different from before. What I'm going to do is, up here, I'm going to keep my font size at 10 pixels, so it's really tiny on my body. What I'm going to do on section 1 is I'm going to give section 1 a font size 2M.
2M.
So the font size on my section 1 is twice as big as on the rest.
So it's going to be 20.
If we come and look at what's actually happened, now this is an H2, and this is an H2, but this H2 is huge. Why is it so much bigger? And this is size 10. This is not 1.5 times bigger than that. This is not 15 pixels. But I have my list here is set to 1.5M. Why is it so gigantic? What's going on? And to make matters even worse, why not? You know, we can make this even crazier. On my list items themselves, if I decided to set a font size of 1.5M, just for fun, you know, why not? All of a sudden, they're massive. So this is getting out of control, literally getting out of control. And
Which is
other
inherent.
Elements get even worse and worse and worse because it's looking at the font size of the parent. So right now, my list item is looking at the font size of my list, and it's going to be 1.5 times bigger than my list. So it's doing this multiplication through all of these different elements until it finally, multiplies all. So we're going from 10 times 2, so we're at 20. At 1.5, we're hitting 30.
Yeah,
and then we're going
like CSS, man.
So, it's
CSS.
It's just getting out of control big. That's also why my section 1 has a font size of 2M. My H2 has a font size of 2M. So we're getting that cascading effect even here, which is why, if we look here, my H2 at the top here is a lot bigger than my H2 that's down here, even though their font size is set to the same value.
Guys, tell me, does anyone in here love CSS? Be honest, like, out of the 3 HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, who loves CSS here? Who loves CSS? Because I might need some help.
This one is multiplying that 2M by the 1.5M to get to this total gigantic size. If you're really good and you really know how to control this stuff, maybe you can do this on purpose and get away with it. But there's a solution that just makes our lives so much easier. So I don't do this. I don't mess around with M's for font size. let's go and see what the solution is.
RM. See. I know.
Before I go into the solution, which is the rem unit, I just don't want to poop on the M too much. It is a super useful unit, and after we understand what a rem is, I'm going to go into when we might want to choose which one.
Hello, Manju dresses. Hey, I'm a beginner too. I think I study coding. No, I did before this, but it wasn't for good use. It was for school, and I didn't remember anything. But now we are doing it with like a serious manners. At school, I just slack off, but here we are studying it and actually remembering. Because at the end of this, I might try to get a job. Let's see how far could we go, right? So I'm taking this course from Scrimba, which is a pretty good one. Highly recommend it. It's called Front-End Developers Career Path. Really good course. Like it teaches you everything. It's basically my school whole program in here. Except my school, like you can make connection, but here you can make connection as well. You can go to Discord. I'm being like a advertiser for Scrimba, but hey, I love this platform. It's really interactive. You can fix anything on here. But I would say I'm a beginner. I think I start coding back for like 2 weeks now. Feel amazing because I know actually what skill that I need to have to put in and what would I get. Like I start building some application, like stuff like that, and it works, and it is amazing. It's an amazing feeling. It's like you get your first kiss. Yeah, it's basically that feeling, right? Or like you solve like a huge problem and you feel good, right? And you feel good. So I just start coding back for like 2 weeks, and I actually stream here. So I stream what I learned, what I did, what I'm planning to do, stuff like that. And yeah, we are making some good progress. Not yesterday. Yesterday was I would say yesterday was a slack off day, but today we will try to catch up with everything that we missed yesterday.
And hopefully make all of it a lot more clear on why both of these are super useful and super important when we start thinking responsibly. So the rem is an M, but it's short for root M. And what does that mean? Well, it means it's always, instead of being relative to the parent, like the M is, it's always relative to root of our document. And I've used the word root a few times, and the root of an HTML page is always the HTML element itself. That's where a lot of the defaults are coming from, even though we haven't actually been styling that in our CSS up until now. So you might be wondering, how does this make our life easier? And let's go and take a look at how. So remember right now, we get these giant sizes coming, even though this is set to 2M and this is set to 2M. This one is getting gigantic. It's getting out of control because it's 2M times 1.5M, and it's scaling up, and it's a compounding factor that's going on. Whereas if we use root M, we lose that. So on my font sizes here, I'm going to switch that to an REM instead of an M. And the same thing here, and the same thing here, and the same thing on my headings. And let's go and take a look at it right away without doing anything else. And look at that. This font size is now the same as this font size. And this is a lot bigger than this one, but that's because I do have my font size set to 1.5 rem here. So this font size will be bigger. I guess we can get rid of that comment because it doesn't really apply anymore. And here, we used to have that double compounding factor that's going on. My list item was compounding through this, which was then compounding again through that. If I take this off now, and we take a look, it's going to look exactly the same, because it's just set to that one size that's relative to the HTML element. Remember that cool thing with M's when I changed the font size on my body and everything just worked around that and sort of scaled up and down with that one unit? So it's almost like M's and Rems are almost like creating a scale instead of creating these set font sizes. So what we can do is on our HTML element, we can set a font size on here. So I'm going to set a font size of
16
10 pixels.
10 pixel?
And we go and take a look at what that's done. Everything has shrunk down. Everything on this page has gotten a lot smaller. And if I come on the HTML element here and I make this 30 pixels, everything will have gotten much, much, much bigger, except for this paragraph. Why hasn't that paragraph gotten bigger? What's going on? Can you figure it out?
Wait. So that right there is the link, right? No, it's this. Href Lauren Ipsum is a nectus etolopolose polokobodake. And we do this. P, I think because P has a default font size. I'm assuming that. I mean, this one has to be. Yeah, I'm assuming that P has a default value.
If you remember, the paragraph is inheriting its font size. The section 2 doesn't have a font size on it. Nothing.
Oh, yes. Section 2. What's section 2? Yeah, section 2 doesn't have font size. Got it. My guess was way off. Section 2 doesn't have font size. That's why it's not inherit. It's not having the 10 pixel. Wait, but the body does. Oh, it's not. It doesn't have like the RM here. RM 1.5. 30 pixel. The whole HTML is 30 pixel. But why is not this?
Thing that is contained, except the body has it. This is an absolute unit. It's not relative to anything. We have this in pixel, so this is where it's and it will not change. What we've managed to do, so if we switch this over from that to 1M, and by 1M I'm doing 1 rem. For font size, I'm always going to stick with rems. And you can see here what's happened is everything is going to that nice scaling feature where everything is scaling up or down.
Guys, font size always stick with rem. That's first rule.
Without the possibility of running into that compounding issue. Now, the one thing I wouldn't actually set a set font size on my HTML element like this. Usually, I'm just leaving it at the default, or I might use percentage if I need to play with it. And you'll see some people recommend setting the percentage really low here to shrink things. If you set it to 62.5%, this makes the default, which was 16, now become 10. So when you, instead of having to think of 1 rem as 16 pixels, and then it's hard to do math, like what's 16 times 1.5, it's easy now because this is 10, and then that becomes 10, so this is 20, and this is 15. It makes it much easier to think that way.
Okay.
I don't do that. I did for a little while, because it is easier, I will admit, but after some time, you really do get used to working on this scale of 16 pixels, and when you need to scale this up, and you're going to see when we start getting into mobile, when we start doing different designs, you're going to have on a mobile screen, you're probably going to have a smaller font size, and when you get to a bigger screen, you will up the font size. So you can up the scale on it, but instead of using percentage, maybe we just keep this at 100 as the default, and then at the bigger size, you just bump it up to 110 and everything, or 120, everything just scales up with. So I tend to not even bother with this, and I leave my rems like that and play around with it, and I've gotten used to doing that. And that's how I'm going to be working throughout the rest of this course. So you will get a chance to see, and I'm going to explain myself every time I'm using these units, especially for the next little while while we're doing them.
It's a little bit confusing.
A little bit, just a little bit. Have a purpose, and we're going to see what the purpose is and how I decide between M and rem and what my rule.
So root is rem is basically using the root font style. So the roots of all of this is 10, right? Right, body. Those 1 time 100.
Rule of thumb for them.
Huh? Guys. Huh. What? No way.
All right, so we've seen percentages, we've seen ems, we've seen rems, of course we've seen pixels, so how do we decide which one to use and in what situation? If we go back to pixels and when we were using them, a bit of a history lesson before we move forward. Pixels used to cause some pretty big problems because they're a fixed unit, but not in the same way like a centimeter is, because a centimeter is you take a measure and you can measure it, whereas a pixel was a dot on your screen, and that's technically what a pixel really is. But in CSS, the pixel doesn't look at the dots on the screen anymore. It now follows what we call the reference pixel. A reference pixel is a fixed size, and they had to come up with a solution because the problem was we started getting these devices that were different resolutions. So imagine if you had a retina display and a regular display, and you set something to pixels. It looked fantastic on your normal screen, but on that retina display, it would be half that size and then just be really small. So we couldn't set things in pixels at all. So M and rem first. We needed them pretty much. But the reference pixel, the idea here is they switched the pixel. So instead of following a dot on the screen, it's following a set size, just like an inch or a centimeter would. That size, I'm not going to get too much into it. It's pretty much 1/96th of an inch, and the way they calculate it is that if you're an arm's length away